Ever since Prometheus stole fire from the gods, we have gathered around its glow, sharing song, dance, and tales of our journeys through this mysterious world. Now in a time when our culture's fire is dimmed, when we've forgotten our stories and lost our way, an ember still burns, waiting for us to breathe life into the coals once more. The ember invites us to remember our mythopoetic inheritance, to reawaken a living culture rooted in reverence as we tend the quiet flame that still glows beneath the ashes of modern life.
Welcome to The Ember. In this episode, I'll be talking with Judy Bekker, and our conversation will be on thresholds. So I'm inviting you to come and take your seat around the fire and to enjoy this conversation. Judy Bekker is a facilitator, mentor and elder based here in the Western Cape. And over 4 decades, she has guided people through thresholds in boardrooms, in the wilderness, in sacred circles. She brought the Vision Quest here to South Africa in 1992 and guided 76 of these before handing this on. And for 10 years, she led the gender reconciliation training across Southern Africa. And she's the author of Calling the Daughters, which is a book about rites of passage for young women. And this year, her second book, Meeting Mountain, will be published. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about thresholds, and I'd love to read a poem which is in the tradition of the Ember as we begin. And it's a beautiful poem, really, about exactly that, about the thresholds that are available to us to step over. Prospective Immigrants, Please Note, by Adrian Rich. Either you will go through this door or you will not go through. If you go through, there is always the risk of remembering your name. Things look at you doubly, and you must look back and let them happen. If you do not go through, it is possible to live worthily, to maintain your attitudes, to hold your position, to die bravely. But much will blind you, much will evade you. At what cost? Who knows? The door itself makes no promises. It is only a door. So Judy, it feels like you've lived a life that has been, in a way, marked by a range of different thresholds.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if we could begin purely by exploring that word and what it means to you, like for the listener, like how would you describe a threshold that we might find in our lives?
Well, I love that poem because stepping through a doorway is exactly that. And I think of edges when I hear the word thresholds. I think of being on an edge. I think of uncertainty as I take a step, because usually a threshold speaks to the unknown often. I think of margins, marge, that beautiful word, the margins in our lives and how we move between them, through them, over them. I think of change. I think of being called to consciousness, actually. Yeah.
Call to consciousness, perhaps you can say a little more about that, and I'm curious as to how that's appeared in your life, this call to consciousness.
Well, it's come hand in hand with the many thresholds that we cross, and we're all crossing thresholds every day, but they've become mundane because we're not aware. Our awareness is dulled in this time and in this world. And so when I say a call to consciousness, it's actually a call to waking up. Waking up to what's around me, waking up to what I'm stepping over, through, around. And it's becoming alert, aware, vigilant.
Yeah, it's so interesting when I hear you say that. So for me, it feels like there's also been many thresholds that I've crossed in my life, and some of them have been thresholds that I have consciously stepped over, and some have been more where I've been almost feels like I've been pushed over, you know, or fallen over in a way. But each, as you say, kind of pulling me towards perhaps a more authentic version of who I really am in this world. And I'm just curious if there is a threshold that you can name in your life that that paved the way for other thresholds, or that felt really significant in terms of your own becoming, your own movement towards this evolving consciousness that we're speaking of.
Just this morning, when I woke up with thresholds on my mind, I suddenly thought of the way I was born, the way I came into the world, which I was conscious of in a very different way. But I nearly died, and so did my mother when I was born. And so that was a huge threshold. I lived. I chose to live as a little thing. And while I don't know that consciously now, that whole experience, I think the body carries memory of it. So that was a big one for me, the way I came into the world. Then there's the vision quest. I mean, maybe we can come back to that. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because the vision quest feels like it's a rite of passage. So perhaps that would be an interesting thread to follow. So it feels like for some thresholds, there are, traditionally, there have been rites of passage, and still these exist, of course. Marriage ceremonies, for example, baby naming ceremonies, etc. And yet, in our lives, there's also been a lot of rites of passage that have been lost in Western culture. So, yeah, let's speak a little bit about Vision Quest, what it means as a rite of passage. And I'm also curious to hear about, your first experience of Vision Quest.
Yeah. Well, I became interested in passage rites quite a long time ago because I worked with a lot of Xhosa, Zulu people and noted how alive, for some of them, passage rites still are. And a couple of us got together and began to look at the lack in so-called Western culture. And we were looking at our daughters who were growing into adulthood and bewailing the fact, actually, that there was nothing for them besides an 18th birthday, where if you came from a wealthy family, you might get a key to a car, or 21st birthday, which is a very strange thing to many people in South Africa who do not celebrate 21, but who go off to the bush. And so we created a particular rite of passage for our daughters. And that grew and grew and grew over the years. And so I've had the privilege of being with many daughters and mothers and grandmothers in marking a young woman's entry into adulthood. And what a beautiful thing it is. And to do something that's extended, not just an afternoon. So how I came to the Vision Quest was, having done that, and we were busy working with our own daughters, I was beginning to get quite burnt out in the corporate world. And I decided with my partner to go on a learning journey. And we asked colleagues and associates and friends in the US, what would you go to if you had time? Where would you want to learn? And they sent us lots of things, suggestions, but one thing absolutely gripped me in terror. And it was an invitation to go and sit in the desert. And with mountain lion and tarantula and who knows what else, rattlesnakes galore, to go and sit in the desert and meet myself anew, to sever from what didn't serve me anymore, to cross a huge threshold for me, and to be alone for 4 days and nights, fasting. So I resisted and resisted until I couldn't say no. And I went, and it was a big threshold for me. I was in a strange country. I didn't have a connection with the land in the way I was beginning to learn to connect to earth here, to water, to mountain. I live with mountains all around me. And here I was going into the desert with a whole lot of strangers. It was life-changing. It was life-changing. And part of my vision, because the invitation is that you go to the mountain or the desert to cry for a vision and to bring that vision back so you and your people may live. So part of my vision was that I wanted to do this work. And I didn't know how on earth I was going to begin. I knew nothing about it. I had done some wilderness work with women, but it was a very new beginning for me, and I jumped. It was a huge leap of faith. And I never looked back. I thought, this is my work, and on we go. I had to keep doing the corporate work. I found a new energy for that because I was doing this work, which was soul work, as we've talked about before. So it became a very good balance. I could go into corporates and actually speak about this. And a couple of CEOs and HR people came on the Vision Quest.
I mean, Vision Quest is such an incredibly transformative process, for people who go through this, and you described it there as life-changing. And you brought this to South Africa, you've led hundreds of people through this Vision Quest. Just curious to tune in here as to how that relates to consciousness, to soul you mentioned, to finding out who we really are in this earth. What is life changing about Vision Quests?
Many things. We would always welcome people into the consideration and exploration of what their challenges were. So the first question would be, what brings you to our door? What brings you to our gate? And what are you hoping for as you step out of everything that's familiar? You leave your home, your children, your work, your food. You're leaving everything behind. And what does this mean for you? What do you hope to achieve? And for a lot of people, it was about the recognition that big change needed to happen. I can't tell you what it is, but I know that I need to change. I need transformation. I need transcendence. People languaged it in all sorts of ways. And I think it's the combination of the act of severing, of letting go, of saying, I can actually leave this behind, and I can walk out into a wilderness, and I'm going to endeavor to live there. So it was facing fear, finding courage. We also like to think we taught people a little bit of how to listen more deeply, how to look. We are so fast-moving in our heads, in our feet, everywhere. And so to encourage people to look, really look. So when the lizard comes by, look at it. Talk to it. Commune with it. Do something different. Watch the ants for an hour. What do they teach you? So the notion that everything elemental, the fact that we believed everything has life, pay attention to it, listen to it. What's the message? Everything can be significant. Not that one wants to become precious, you know, that everything that crosses your path, what does it mean? But there is some value in that, to really notice and to pause and to practice pausing. When you're in the mountain, whether you call it meditation, prayer, I don't mind. But people did it, and people who've never sang. And what transmutes for one when singing is a whole world, you know. So lots of mini thresholds crossed and lots of challenge, lots of tears wept, lots of struggle. But the very fact of endurance, I think the victory of it allows people to think, gosh, you know, I did this. And the transformation for me lives in the fact that people will write to us years later saying, you have no idea what those 11 days did for me. And some people write in their dying. You know, we've had people die after doing Vision Quest with us, but writing in their dying, saying, I still carry the image of my place in my mind's eye. It always makes me weep.
So beautiful.
I just find that so beautiful.
Yeah. So beautiful. You know, and for me it feels, what's alive for me as I hear you speak of these things is how transformational that is for individuals living their lives, but also you talk also of Vision Quest as being a place where we receive a vision for our lives, but for our people, you know, potentially for the greater Earth community, for those that we serve. And I'm just, it's so interesting the times that we're living in right now. And, you know, Vision Quest really being this place that kind of bridges the personal and the transpersonal. And as you also spoke of slowing down, it reminded me of Bayo Kumalafi says this beautiful phrase. He says, the times are urgent, let's slow down. And our lives are so busy that sometimes it's difficult to notice potentially the thresholds, the moments for stillness, the moments for slowing down that are right in front of us. So Vision Quest is quite a big one, but let's talk a little bit about some of the smaller thresholds. How do we learn to listen, to tune in, as you were describing, to those thresholds which are inviting us forwards, you know, towards greater truth, towards more fullness of our lives, towards more aliveness? How do we recognize those thresholds, and how do we walk towards them more consciously?
Practice. And so in working in these realms and fields, we had to be sure that we were practicing and still practice. So a commitment to being a lifelong learner, I think, is a very good place to start. A commitment to honesty, being honest with oneself. It is about deciding to live differently. And so I think on a Vision Quest, many people discovered what was possible and what they might be able to embrace. And that's what they bring down the mountain, and I think that's what sticks, because they begin to live differently. So for me, it is the most wonderful thing to know that you can be engaged in some small way with change for others, with transition, with transformation. And I don't know how else one learns to listen. I just know that it's been a slow process for me. And deeply looking, deeply seeing. There are observation practices that are very good ways to begin, where you just sit with something. And don't move, don't touch, just sit with part of a leaf and to train oneself to be still and slow down enough. I mean, you get bored, and boredom's a big piece of the Vision Quest experience, and we always said it's a gateway. When in our lives do we ever allow ourselves to be bored? I very rarely hear children these days say, "Mummy, I'm bored." Most of the time, they're not. I doubt if they experience boredom the way I did growing up. So, yeah, that pausing, that, I think, witnessing too, really witnessing what's around me. And that often takes some compassion. And the development of more compassion and less judgment. Less judgment.
You mean more compassion for self and others, less judgment of self and situations of others?
Yeah. And so that's interesting when we think about that in the world the way it is right now. It's judgment, it's assertion, it's opposition, it's outrage, it's activism, so what on earth does one mean when you say it's about developing compassion and less judgment? I think it's about that poem and holding our positions in life. We are so attached to our positions, our beliefs, our opinions, our sides. I'm on this side, you're on that side. And yet Bio also spoke about stay with the trouble. I always loved that phrase, don't turn your back on the trouble, which is our instinct. Let me walk away from this. Let me fix this. Not fixable. Not fixable. The dying to parts of myself becomes a key element in any solo journey into mountain or desert or forest. And it sounds quite radical. What does that mean? It means letting go of things that no longer serve me, or others for that matter, if I can. But the death in the Vision Quest process is important, and that people begin to embrace their own dying. So we have had people on vision fasts with terminal illnesses who've chosen to go into the mountain to mark their passage, their life passage, and they're approaching, apparently, death. It's a huge responsibility for guides, that. And there's a whole lot that can be said about the preparation for that. But what I love is the impact that these 4 days and nights have on people, because long after the Vision Quest, they will write to us about recollections of what happened for them or what they've made happen. We've had people who have died after their Vision Quest, sometime later, but have written most beautifully about what they still carry with them, about the very place they lived in, that they still have an image that holds them steady in their illness or their dying. My brother was one such person, and I've written his story in my book, the upcoming book, Meeting Mountain, which is a lot about Vision Fast. And he came healthy to the Vision Quest with us and wanted to work the blueprint for his retirement on the mountain. So at first I thought, gosh, is that all you want to work? It was, and he did it, and he loved it. And he came back to his company and told them, this is my plan. He was a partner. And so he retired, and as happens sometimes, less than a year after retiring, he developed cancer, which he lived with and battled with, and for 3 years, I think it was. But in his surgeries, and there were many, that some of them went wrong, a surgeon asked him one day, I actually love this because the surgeon sat on the end of his bed and said, "We're so sorry for the mess of this last surgery. Here's what you looked like inside. This is what we had to deal with. And where do you go to? How on earth do you handle this? Everything that's happening to your body." And he told his story. He spoke of the place that he'd lived in and how alive it was for him still. And he could describe it, and his meeting with Snake. And I mean, I think the surgeon was blown away. I wasn't there, but Michael told me the story. So there are many, many such stories. And yeah, I think of the people who've come to deal with very hard life circumstances. Physical hardship, rape, molestation, disruption, divorce, a nasty divorce, suicide that they've had to handle in others that they loved. So people bring an enormous amount, and as guides, you really have to keep a clear mind and a stable heart.
I'd love us to touch in a little bit about what's happening in the world right now. So, yeah, we're seeing the movement towards increased wars. We talked about increased separation between people, the continuation of ecological destruction. You know, what Joanna Macy would have termed the great unraveling. It's really happening right before our eyes. And I'm just curious if you could speak into this from perhaps another lens, which might be, are we as humanity facing a threshold? And if that's the case, what is being asked of us right now?
Gosh, that's a question to take to a mountain.
Yes.
I definitely think we're on a huge threshold. And what I'm busy thinking about is what is required of me before I even get to humanity. What is required of me? And it's really hard to speak to that because I am quite committed to witnessing. And so I won't walk out of the room when the television is on and there's children dying, and I won't leave the room. I will stay and witness that, because I think that's something we can do, because you can, although we're not face to face by any means, but at a vibrational level, at a frequency level where all of humanity is interconnected, we can actually do that for others. So witnessing is really important for me. I find witnessing degradation of the earth terribly hard. And so the way I'm meeting that is not just wanting to be an observer. I want to address what needs to be addressed in me. I can't talk about you or the whole species. I can just work on me.
Yeah.
And the witnessing piece is vital for me. And being a willing witness, which is quite hard. I had a situation with one of my daughters. We were watching the news and there were terrible scenes. And she got up and she ran out saying, "I don't know how you can watch this." So I went after her and I said, "I watch because I need to witness." And she got it. She came back in.
Sure.
So I've witnessed a lot of death. I've witnessed a lot on screens. As a journalist, I witnessed some terrible things. And alongside witnessing, I think, comes the ability to not judge so much and to let go of position or sides. You know, whose side are you on? Do you like Mr. Trump or don't you? The very fact that there are people who might support him is hard for me. But it's true. So the less judgment that I can carry and the more compassion I can develop for all of us, not for the details of war. The part that really gets me, though, is what's happening to the earth and the largesse of earth, and still here, and will be here long after we've gone. And that always blows me away.
Yeah, and I'm in what you were saying there about relationship and compassion for others. It feels to me that if we can really tune into the living relationship we have with Earth, for we are, at the end of the day, of her, we are her. And it feels like, how can we tune into that place of belonging, or the recognition of our sacred relationship with her might be one way that we can heal the way that we treat the earth, so that it's no longer these resources that we might be using. Natural resources. Oh gosh, that term really sticks with me, because actually no, we are part of this living web. So it's interesting that you're speaking of compassion, and I'm curious as to whether this is actually a place when we're talking about compassion, we're not just talking about compassion for self and for other humans, but actually compassion for the entirety of our living relations. Yeah.
And, communion is a word that's only associated really with religion. Well, it's associated a lot with that. But the notion that we can commune, community is born out of that. And beginning to commune beyond my usual comfort zones. I am loving the work of Robert McFarlane and David Haskell, and have been particularly working with David Haskell's way of listening and looking, but listening. And the notion that when I step into the sea beyond my door, I'm very lucky to live on the Indian Ocean. When I go into the sea, I am touching in to the way water has been since time began. And when I sit on a mountainside and get out of my own head, I am communing with stone that has lived a very long life, far longer than any of us can hope to live.
Let's talk a little about a threshold that you are crossing at this moment into elderhood, or have crossed into elderhood. I'm curious as to what's alive in you as you become an elder. And the second part of this question is, what does it mean to be a conscious elder in these times?
Well, I got very excited about moving into my 70s. It felt like an arrival threshold in a funny way for me. And I've worked always with my own decades. My decade birthdays have been memorable and particular thresholds. So I'm delighted to be here, and am finding an unexpected freedom, not just in terms of maybe time and space, or it's a bigger freedom than that. It's an internal kind of knowing and landing and looking back and looking forward, and definitely not working with regrets. I don't have many of those, if any at all, because everything played a part in getting me to here. So what's required of us has been required by younger ones since I was 50, and they were 30, asking, where are the mentors? Where are the mentors? Why aren't you mentoring us? We ourselves at 50 were looking for mentors. One of my favorite mentors, she's long dead, but when she got to her 80s, she said, "Oh, goody, I'm now in training to be a good ancestor." And so that had relevance for how she lived, you know, the notion that I do go on to be an ancestor. So I think what's required of us now is a lot of listening, and a lot of meeting people exactly where they are with kindness. You know, so I've sat in murder trials where how can you express kindness? But you can if you practice enough. And I think it's something that comes when you get into elderhood and you're in your more sovereign nature. You know, you're not the warrior out proving your strength. You are more of the witness and the presence. And I quite like that. And I think, again, it's back to consciousness. As elders, we can't just creep away and read our books and do the shopping. And I know quite a few people who do that. They just disappear on the world, really, or the world shrinks. They become very small. I don't do that. I think in elderhood, too, you come to lean into your networks much more. And the quality of those networks and connections and communities really come into play because you can start to share, go deeper together. So I have a wonderful group of close-in friends who've spent considerable time in conversation about our dying and paying attention to how that will be and what would we like, what do we have to have in place. Of course we have no choice about how we die, but we can think about it. So death is not a foe for me at all. And I think what is required of elders now is a continued waking up. Just wake up. Don't go back to sleep.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. If there was somebody who was sensed that they were coming towards a threshold in their life, and as we've talked about, threshold can often mean letting go of something or that's come before, and with standing at that threshold might come the excitement and the fear. What advice would you give them at this moment?
I have an image. It's a drawing, an illustration that has stayed with me ever since I saw it. And it's a divide. So there are two sort of cliffs with a big drop. And there's a little figure who's leaping with her hair behind her, and she's leaping across. So I definitely go with that. Be brave and step. You know, and take the first step. That's always the hardest one. And before you do any of it, you have really paused and considered. And you've weighed things up. And you actually know you have to. You just have to step.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Judy, for joining me today for this rich conversation about thresholds. And thank you to tuning in. We look forward to seeing you next time around the fire here at the Ember.